You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News. Let's go back to Guy, Ben, and Frank.
Welcome back to Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. And during our off break, we kind of chat a little bit, but Frank was actually writing an essay. He was taking down so many notes, you could just hear that pencil scribbling on that pad of paper. It's quite interesting. I want to know what he's talking about there. But we've got to come back here to the Picking Up the Pieces segment. Ben, I asked a question before the break about Facebook, and it's starting after MySpace and its original intentions. Go.
Well, I would expand this to the broader social media, all these platforms that exist, Twitter and Facebook being the most prominent, Instagram owned by Facebook. But they all started with young people who had a concept that free speech and the democratization of speech, the enabling of individuals to have a voice was a positive thing. And by and large, I think that was a set of noble objectives. But as they have grown in wealth, they have all been captured by the system. They have all thrown in their future and cast their lot with a globalist progressive agenda, the Democratic Party. And that's the reality. And so these platforms now are no longer beacons of free speech. They've abdicated what they started, the point they started from, and they are now organs of the state and organs of a state that has a fascist vision that only those who think correctly have the right to free speech. And if you don't think correctly, you should be shut down. So that's where we're at. I don't have a lot of faith that much is going to be done there. And hopefully, new platforms will come along that which believe in the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights. One attempt at that Parler has now been shut down, at least for the time being. And when Amazon Web Services, owned by Amazon, decided to shut down their server availability to Parler, that really shut down the company. And that is very hard to recreate these days. The massive amount of servers you need to handle all of the data that flows through these large social engagement sites. So this is a very serious issue. And how it shakes out, I don't know. I don't have any faith really in government doing anything because I think the Democrats will block any attempt by prosecutors to do anything. There will be, I think, one avenue, and that's the same states that tried to correct the injustice of this election. Texas plus 25 other states have to lead the charge against these big tech monopolies and what they're doing.
All right. I had to take an oral comprehensive after I had my written comprehensive exam. And so Frank has already put down his essay on the written comprehensive. Now your oral comprehensive. Go, Frank.
You know, I don't think we can ignore the China connection in all of this.
Ooh.
If we look at the big sources of cutting down free speech, of cutting down any influence that those on the other side, on the more conservative or centrist side of the political realm have, a lot of that comes from the big tech and comes from Hollywood. Those are centered in California. They all have dreams of selling popcorn and product to the billion-plus people of China. And we've seen in numerous cases, for example, in the NBA not too long ago, where China basically said, I don't like what somebody in your group said. I'm going to shut you down from doing business with us. Don't ignore the fact that so much of what we're reading and seeing is directly in line with what how China rules its own government. We're even talking about social credit systems where, as Ben put out before, if you don't think the right way, if you don't believe in the right things, well, we're going to cut you out. That's what's going on in China under the Chinese so-called social credit system. We are seeing that precise concept being introduced in the United States. The avenue for introducing it is these big tech giants that have direct financial ties with China. We're seeing it brought up into, drummed into our young people's heads on colleges, which are getting a lot of money from Confucius Institutes run by You guessed it, China. So there is a significant attack on the United States from China in these avenues. And I've got to tell you, in the great historical context, what the Chinese are doing with their clients on social media giants, on college campuses, is no less an attack on the United States than the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and no less devastating. In fact, even more so.
Go back to some of our previous programs when we talked about Huawei, when we talked about TikTok, and this is all China trying to grab what they can of the United States. Is this the ultimate power grab? It very well may be, and unbelievable. We've got to take a break, and we're going to be back. Put a bow on the program here. This is Inside the News. We will be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News. Here's Guy, Ben, and Frank.
Welcome back to our last segment of Inside the News. Frank Vernuccio, top left, Ben Brunson, bottom middle. My name is Guy Wehman. Glad to have you with us. We started to broach the subject about China in the last segment here. And China, with the COVID-19, a perfect example that Donald Trump, president, was trying to keep pushing the narrative. This is the China virus. This is the Wuhan virus, and keep pushing that. And the media kept pushing back. No. Why do you keep calling it the China virus? Actually asked from the press room in the White House to the press secretary and also to Donald Trump. They kept pushing back on that narrative. And Frank, you nailed it during the break. Go.
You know, if you recall, after the attack, the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center, on the Pentagon, Americans are united against terrorism. There is strong feelings of anger throughout the country. The media is filled with stories about people joining the armed forces to fight against terrorism. The attack by China, whether intentional or through negligence, on the rest of the world with the spread of the COVID-19 virus, there is nothing in the media about any expression of anger against China. China is the culprit in all of this, again, whether intentional or through negligence. And yet no place, you can scour the media, there's no expression of anger against China. It's a clear example of China's rock-solid control over a substantial portion of the American news media and the American entertainment industry, that there is no mention of this whatsoever.
All right, Ben, I want you to weigh in on this before we get to our hot button topics.
Well, the big winner of the last 2 months is China. If you were China, you couldn't script the history of the last 2 months any better. Donald Trump, a true foe, a very formidable opponent, a man who re-educated the world about the dangers of China and what they're really about, is out, and a man that is owned by the Chinese, whose family is literally owned by the Chinese. The Chinese have paid tens of millions of dollars to the Biden family, is about to be sworn in as president. And because of that, in the mainstream media now, you can't mention China. You can't talk about China. Even a few months ago, there was a willingness among much of the mainstream media to at least mention China in some negative light from time to time. But now that's off limits. And it's off limits because it would lead to a discussion of Hunter Biden and James Biden and all of the money being reeked in by the Biden family from China. And so now you can't talk about it. This is a huge, huge win for China, and a very, very bad day, a bad set of events for democracy, freedom, and humanity on a global basis.
It's just like when Newt Gingrich was trying to bring up George Soros on the Fox News Network, and Harris Faulkner says, well, we don't have to go there. And or maybe it was somebody else from the business network that said that. Well, guess what? George Soros, we're mentioning your name. China, we're mentioning your names. And who knows where we're going to go. Okay, Frank, your hot button topic this week.
You wonder how we got to this point, and it didn't happen overnight. For decades, our universities and our high schools, even our grammar schools, taught a bastardized form of American history in which everything good about America was eliminated and all sorts of charges were made about America that were in many cases exaggerated. When you have brought up now 2 generations of students under the guidance of hard left professors whose most profound goal was the elimination of the concept of the Bill of Rights in the United States, the elimination of any pride in our country. This is the end result. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It came from the high schools and college campuses who taught America was a bad place, who taught that individual freedom was a bad thing. This is the end result of all of that.
Okay, Ben, your hot button topic.
During the incursion into the Capitol, something interesting happened. Several computers went missing. And these computers aren't ordinary computers. They're computers that are connected to the government's SIPRnet. The SIPRnet's a highly classified, highly encrypted network used by the DoD and top levels of government for classified communications. And it really begs the question, were there agents of foreign governments operating in that environment, taking advantage of the chaos to obtain these computers? But it is a real issue to the country and very threatening.
Ben, I want to ask you this question. We only got 20 seconds, and they said that there's multiple times that the Capitol has been under siege like that. And I thought I read something like the late 60s or 70s, the Weather Underground did something similar. Do you recall that?
Well, the Weather Underground was involved in bombings in Washington and New York, but I don't recall an incursion like that since 1812, to be honest with you.
Okay. Frank, do you remember that?
Oh, I was there. It was terrible.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Frank.
Frank, thanks.
Ben, Guy, and to our audience, thank you.
And we want to thank you for listening and thank you so much for watching. This is Inside the News, and we'll meet again next week.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.